Hi again, everybody. It is Greg Friel here with the Friel Thing podcast. My guest this week is somebody who I've known for a few years, but we've been doing some amazing work lately, and we're just here to brag about it. Basically, that's about it. I have from Creatovators the one and only June Grindley. Applause, applause, applause. Welcome, June. How are you?
Hi Greg, it's great to be here. I am well, thank you, and looking forward to doing this.
Good. So for the folks at home, a quick 30 seconds on who you are, what Creatovators is, and how that is so awesome that I have deigned to speak to you.
So I am June Grindley, as you have said. I am the founder, director and autism practitioner in Creatovators. We're a social enterprise. That means we're not for profit, and we work with people on the autistic spectrum and their families to help them. And we also train professionals in autism and in something called Lego-based therapy. Yes, I did say Lego-based therapy. I always have to repeat that for people. So I'm a mum to a 19-year-old.
Everybody kind of goes, what?
I'm a mum to a 19-year-old on the spectrum and a 17-year-old daughter who's not on the spectrum as far as we know. So that's who I am, and that's what we do.
Tell me about the origins of Creatovators and how you get started.
Okay, so I was working as a sole trader. I was teaching people something called active listening. So it's how to listen properly and effectively to people, particularly if they need to talk about a problem or something. So I was working in that, and it's kind of non-directive counselling that I was taking into businesses. And so I was working in communication, and my son got a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome when he was 4.5. And knowing the importance of communication, I thought, okay, at that time it was really thought of as a communication developmental delay. And knowing the importance of it, I thought, okay, how do I then teach him how to communicate effectively and well? So I retrained, did an MSc in autism, and then thought, yeah, let's do this. And what was just a sort of little project in the kind of listening stuff that I was doing suddenly became the main thing. And that's how we set it up, really. And I went for the social enterprise model because it really is about the social impact that's important to me. And yet I feel that the work that people do in this sector needs to be valued as well. So it's not all about, funding. So people are valuing the services that they're receiving.
Yeah. So how long ago was that when you first set it up?
Oh gosh, that was 10 years ago.
Really? As long as that?
Yeah.
So what did that first, those first sort of tentative steps into this world, look like? I mean, we'll get into more about the Lego-based therapy side of things and what it is that you're doing now. But the first steps into that world, what did that look like?
So I started to go to some more networking events to find out what people maybe thought about it. And I also worked alongside Andrew's school when I got to that point, and we just tried things out, and we tried out a mum through the networking said, yeah, I've got somebody on the autistic spectrum, come and work with him and try it out. And we tried out teaching him how to listen, and that went really well. And we tried out the Lego-based therapy, which I had learned about through the course that I was doing, and that turned out really well as well. So really those were the first tentative steps, and finding out how to work with people at the different levels that they're at, and looking at them and behind the label of autism to the person, and seeing the potential within them and pulling that forward, and really just saying, we can do this, and this can be really positive. and it doesn't have to be the negative deficit model that a lot of people think of. The people on the spectrum have so much to offer, and they look at life in different ways, and many of them have, you know, skills and talents because of some of their obsessions, and some of them have phenomenal memories for tiny details that we would normally miss, people who aren't on the spectrum. So yeah, it's looking behind that sort of label and just saying, what does this person have, and what can they offer to society, and how can we pull that out and help them to get there.
I don't know if this is the case or not, but in my head I sort of think of it like this, and that when I look back on some people who I knew in my younger life, knowing what I know now about autism from working with you, and it makes me think. I think that you would probably describe them as being on the spectrum. Through a modern person's eyes, as it were, through these being able to recognize certain behaviors. In terms of how the modern world sees autism, how much do you think it's changed since, like in the past 20 years? I mean, certainly for me, it feels, even more recently, I do feel like there's a greater awareness of it, and a greater seeking to understand it.
Yeah, so it's come a long way, and it probably still has a long way to go. But people like, Chris Packham, who is on the spectrum, has really helped people to understand, and just people who are in the limelight, and I've actually said, I'm on the spectrum, just helping people to know that this is somebody who has made it and has managed to cope throughout life, and he has his own ways of getting support and helping himself, so that's been helpful. But yeah, there's a long way to go, because people on the spectrum are very, very different, and in many cases they'll be themselves, but there are also those who will do what's called masking, so they'll cover up. Particularly girls are good at that. They're good at imitating and seeing what's going on. But it's the structure of the brain and the way the brain works that's actually different. But picking up on that can be quite hard, because we haven't worked out exactly what's going on. And one of the difficulties within the field of autism research is that there is no conclusive thing. There's lots of suggestions, and there's lots of, this looks like it's this, but there's nothing definitive yet. So that's really where we're up to with it.
It's funny you use the expression on the spectrum, and this is something that we hear quite a lot these days, and when people talk about autism. Tell me a little bit about what that really means when we say that somebody is on the spectrum.
So the spectrum used to look like a straight line, and people would be either highly autistic and low functioning, is how they described it, so they weren't as capable, and then they would look at the IQ, and they would say if it was over 70 they were higher functioning and lower in autism. However, somebody who's on the autistic spectrum in the last few years said that wasn't very helpful, because everybody is quite different, and there were expectations on those who are higher functioning placed on them, which actually they struggled to maintain, and they struggled to live up to those expectations. So what Rebecca Burgess, who is, as I say, on the spectrum herself, what she came up with was a circle, and she identified things like language and motor skills, perception, something called the executive function. It's the front part of the brain, really, that helps with planning skills and how you organise your life, and remembering things that you're doing right then, and remembering details that you need to know right then. So it's kind of like short-term working memory. And then
Mm-hmm.
things like the senses as well. So she identified those and put them round a circle, like a spectrum. And what she said was, if you are good at something, then you can put a dot further out towards the outside part of the circle.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel you're so good at something, then you can put a dot closer to the centre. So, for example, if you're not so good at filtering out all the information that's coming, you would maybe put it in close to the centre. But if your language skills are pretty good, then you could put that further out. So that's basically what they talk about more recently as being on the spectrum.
One of the things that you guys do, which is fascinating, is Lego-based therapy, which I believe is therapy that was first espoused by Daniel Legoff. Now, I'm doing this from memory, from editing a video for days, June, for days. So it's imprinted on my memory.
You still get nightmares about that jumper.
Absolutely. But the fact that I remember his name, I think is good. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the history of Lego-based therapy.
So basically, Daniel Legoff, he deals with clients, I guess you'd call them, within his clinic, and he had two sort of individual clients. They were doing sort of one-to-ones, and they sort of passed each other in the waiting room this day, and both of them happened to have Lego models, and they'd never taken an interest in each other before. But they saw the Lego models and it started up a conversation. So Daniel noticed this and wondered about whether he should maybe talk to the families and try and get them hooked up in some way. So that's what he did. And they started just with the two of them, and they started to do Lego stuff together. And then it developed from there into a little sort of club where they were using Lego in different ways, and they created specific roles for the kids to work together as a team, and they worked through that. Because they were so interested and motivated, they were able to work on some of the social skills and to guide them through the difficulties that they can have with modern day life, but also I guess they would see the good things that are there as well, because some of them have phenomenal brains and can really just build Lego models that are so detailed. It's one of the things my son can do. They can look at something and go, all right, okay, I can put that together, and they might experiment with it a bit, but you know, it's just amazing what they can do.
At the play scheme the other day, Andrew was telling me what I was doing wrong with my camera,
Yes.
which was brilliant, because I don't know. He knows better than me. I'm kidding, of course, but he was kind of like, why are you using that filter? I'm kind of like, yeah, why am I using that filter? I shouldn't actually have that on the camera just now. And I'm kind of like, he's thinking, you know, just at that level that, you know, I'm kind of just, I'm doing my thing, but his attention to detail is incredible, and just the conversation that we had, you know, that morning, he was talking about a couple of things, and I'm like, just the level of detail, talking about what he was planning on doing with, you know, with his lighting side of things, and that business that he's developing, you know, and his product knowledge and all that sort of things. It's incredible. I'm kind of like, okay, right, and I actually have to go, you really know loads about this, and I don't, you know. He's got an incredible grasp of all that, which is fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing what he can actually do when you get through the sort of communication difficulties that he has and the understanding difficulties that he has. Once he understands what he needs to do, he can produce some phenomenal work which is just amazing. And it's trying to help the world and other people to understand what treasure there is there within these people, and what we could do to develop things, even when you think of climate change and the environment, and you think of the problems that the world is dealing with at the moment. These people are just able to see things in a different way that brings a different perspective, and it really is just trying to pull that out. And for us, in some ways, I feel like I'm the one with the difficulties and the problems.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's reversed almost, and the number of times, I mean, as you know, at the play scheme on Saturday, I was working with some children they weren't official Lego blocks, but they were a bit like Lego, and they had some ramps, and we were doing making a ball run, basically, to try and work out how to make it so that some bouncy balls wouldn't bounce out of it. And they came up with different ideas, for testing the bounce of the bouncy ball, and B for just designing the way the blocks were put so that the balls wouldn't bounce out again. And I was things that wouldn't have occurred to me. Not that I have that particularly good kind of engineering brain, but things that just wouldn't occur to me. And and I was just facilitating that by asking questions or making suggestions about how to practically, for example, pull one brick out from the other, or maybe suggesting something else, and they would come up with an idea and I would come up with an idea, which is called collaboration and teamwork, and it's helping them to work through that and to see how that functions, and to explain to them. Sometimes you actually have to say, well, you've come up with a really good idea there, and I think that maybe if we do this too, and then that's my idea building on your idea, and that's how teamwork works. So you're actually explaining to them how these things work. Some of them get it kind of fairly naturally just with practice, but others need that explanation of, if you come up with an idea and if I come up with an idea and then we think of that together, we might come up with another idea, and that's called collaboration. And so you're teaching those, and you can teach some of that to fairly young kids and use some big words with them, and they get it, so that's what we're doing.
One of the things that we've been looking at recently and at present is the early years, just that preschool kind of age. Tell me a little bit about that kind of work that you're doing, and how autism presents itself at such a young age, and are there certain things that people recognize, or certain things that people are on the lookout for, or as doctors or medical professionals or parents, is there certain behaviors that they would maybe recognize in their children?
So this is a fairly new field, and I'll just say my knowledge isn't fantastic on it, but we're getting to grips with it more. So there's a bit more research on it, and a bit more understanding about what we're looking for. One of the big things is language delay. That can just not being able to speak or speak as quickly, that can be one of the things. There's something also called echolalia, which is part of language development, where you actually repeat back a phrase, but if that goes on longer, so you might find somebody repeating a phrase that they've learned on the TV but out of the right context and still doing that.
Right.
Okay, so that's another thing. Some of the sensory things, so inability to deal with loud noises, or inability to deal with textures, things, rough clothes or labels on clothes, inability to deal with certain textures in the mouth or certain tastes in the mouth, wanting to line things up, and rather than line toys up rather than play with them, or playing with them in a very structured fashion all the time. Also sort of anxiety levels, so wanting to be in control of something all the time, and really it has to be my agenda and nobody else's agenda, but that's because I'm scared, and if I'm in control then I'm not so scared, therefore I want to be in control of things all the time. Just seeing some of that detail as well, and kids just being overwhelmed when they're out and about and socially. In early years they are developing those social skills all the time, so it can be, they're not developed by any means at that point, but where some kids will be picking them up naturally when they're out and about and in nursery or playgroup or wherever they are, where they're picking those up naturally, kids on the spectrum won't be picking them up as naturally. There'll be a delay there, and it's really questioning, is that because they're on the spectrum, or is that something else, they're just a bit delayed in the social interaction? And so the whole diagnosis thing is very, very complicated, and you really need somebody who has been trained in diagnosing that to get it right. And you need to be looking at a child in several different situations because, to work out exactly what's going on. And some other conditions can look like autism and vice versa, and there can be an overlap, and you could have more than just one condition. So quite often you'll get a child on the spectrum who has ADHD as well. You can also have them with dyslexia or various things like that. So yes, it's a whole kind of developing early years thing.
As an organization that deals with autism, all the time, that's what you do. What would you like to see happening from maybe at a governmental level, just in terms of assistance, in terms of helping recognize things maybe at a national level, to help organizations like yourself? What's missing that you would like to see?
So I would like to see somebody taking this on and moving it forward and coordinating it so that it's a whole nation approach. At the moment there's what's been a term that's been coined, a postcode lottery. So where you are in the country determines how good the support is that you get. And when I think of education, some schools get it right, some schools really don't get it right, and there's really a policy to keep people who are on the autistic spectrum within mainstream schools, which is not necessarily a bad thing that I'm saying, but if you're going to do that, you really need to have the resources and the support to keep them there and to help them. And I actually think there are cases where a mainstream school, certainly the way it is at the moment, is really just not right for somebody on the spectrum. We originally, in our own situation, we wanted Andrew to stay in mainstream school because he was bright enough to be able to do that, and he's come through school and he has what are they called, standard grades and higher, national fives and higher now. But he has those, and he is bright. You know him. But just education and really what we experienced and what I'm still hearing is that when people are diagnosed, they can just be left hanging after that. There's no support there, and there's really not the resources to give people on the spectrum and their families, because it affects the whole family, the support that they need. And education, it's not compulsory for people to learn about autism. It's a sort of voluntary module, and it's not much. And I did an MSc in autism, and it was 5 years part-time, and I probably did a lot more than some people would do for that. But having said that, you're still learning, and when you go into this field, you have to realise that you're going to be learning, and you're going to be learning, and you're going to be learning all the time. So you have to keep up with what's going on in terms of the research and stuff. So yeah, those are just, I really would like to see it coming from a governmental level right through and filtering through every area, so that people learn and understand. And there is more, giving that positive message that this isn't a bad thing. It's just, it can be a different way of looking at life, and a different way of the brain being structured, which is no bad thing, but also to look behind that label and see the individuals and who they are.
Yeah. So going forward, where would you like to see Creatovators going? I mean, do you work primarily with families or organizations, with businesses in terms of training and awareness? Or is there, a specific area that you're not in just now that you'd like to do more of in the future?
So I grapple with this question all the time, because at the moment we're sort of in transition and looking at how we can grow. I would love to be, at the moment we are working with families, and the play scheme is successful in terms of the social stuff that we're doing. And so we're working with the whole family there, and that's a different model from most play schemes, because most play schemes, they work with the child on the spectrum. But we feel that it's important that it's a whole family support. Right. So yeah, the whole family comes to the play scheme. So, and then I have some one-to-one clients, and that I'm struggling to see how that's continuing to be viable, really, because the amount of work that I put in for one client doesn't really give us the sort of what we would need to keep going as an organisation in terms of funding and that. And then I do the trainings, and the trainings are so vital as well, so that more people understand a bit more about autism, and they have something, what we call an intervention, the Lego-based therapy, which works so well and has proven to work so well, and there's much more research into it now than when I started doing it, and it's proven to be really, really effective. And then the consultations, working with parents, I would love to do more with the parents to support them and to just get them together and do something. But there are other places out there that do that, like Scottish Autism and stuff. So we're kind of looking at areas where there's not a lot happening, and employment would be, I suppose, if we were going to do something different. And I had started furrying into that area when COVID struck, so it became a bit more difficult. But I would love to help employers to see the potential in these people, and I guess that's because of the stage that Andrew's at, and the fact that he's 19, left school, and his positive destination, which is what they call it, fell through. So, and he wants to set up his own business in the lighting industry, as you know, but that's all been closed down, and we're trying to help him a bit with that, but as parents we're also trying to back off a bit with that. So yes, I'm trying to get to the point. I'm trying to get to the point where the organisation isn't just me taking it forward. I'm trying to establish a team who are loyal and committed, and you understand why I want that, having seen me on Saturday morning being very stressed because a couple of my people who had issues on that morning couldn't come along, and the planning that had gone into that was phenomenal because of COVID and COVID regulations and things. So
you're incredibly organised. So June, if people want to find out more about Creatovators and what it is that you do, how do they do that?
So we have a website at www.creatovators.com. So it's creatovators.com. So that's kind of gives a good overview of what we do and talks about what we do there. And we have our Facebook page, so that's Creatovators CIC on Facebook, so that they can like us, follow us, share our stuff. That would be great too. Interact with us a bit. I have a LinkedIn page, and we also have a Creatovators one. Not that it's used very much at the moment, but we're working on doing a bit more of that. And looking at doing an Instagram in the next few weeks. But one of the things we're about to launch, as you know, because you've been working with me on it, is in fact it's up and running now. So it's the bite-sized videos of the Lego-based therapy, and it's just the plain one. We're bringing out another one for early years, which is more focused on early years. But the main one is up and running, so it's bite-sized, so people can go through it by themselves, and that's on the website. And as I say, it is now up and running, and I think we have our first client for that who is doing it all the way through. So
fantastic.
That is lots of fun. So there's loads and loads of stuff going on, and my brain's coming up with ideas all the time. But I just can't do it all. So looking at,
and that's where I come in.
Yeah, more people involved, like yourself.
June, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing a little bit about what it is that you do. It's amazing work, and it's been a real privilege for me to be involved in it and to find out more about what it is that you do. So thank you for that, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Greg. It was great to be here, and thank you for having me along and inviting me, and I hope it's been helpful for other people and those who are going to be listening. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you.